what do we mean by community building? What is that all about? These are some murals from Salem, by the way. Let me see. Okay. So I think of community building as a series of different things, a little bit on a continuum, but it starts with accountability. That community development corporations must be accountable to the local community. And that is both sort of a legal and sort of formal accountability in which, community residents have ways to govern or, are part of the governance structure. But there's also this sort of more unofficial accountability, which comes with the fact that CDCs are place-based, they're rooted in the community, they're there for the long haul. If you do something poorly, you will be there to be held accountable, unlike a developer who can sort of leave town and walk away. So setting up the organization so that you're genuinely accountable to the community is good, but that's not really empowerment. This is a little bit more on the kind of lower end of the scale, if you will. Then there's another way about community building in which CDCs are a form of collective ownership, and that the assets owned by a CDC are held in trust for the community forever. We have permanent affordable housing. If we build community space, it belongs to the broader community. It doesn't belong to any one individual who can sell it or profit from it. Another aspect of community building is this idea of building social capital, bringing people together, making sure neighbors know neighbors, sometimes creating mutual aid mechanisms. Some of this can be purely social, like, cookouts and summer parties, and some of it can be the kind of social capital we've seen in place during the pandemic, where folks are helping each other out in all sorts of ways that come from having a relationship before the pandemic. Then you get into sort of, I think, the other end of the continuum, where you're talking about residents having a real voice in making decisions about the housing they live in, or about the programs that are being offered in the neighborhood. Building leadership. A lot of CDCs run programs to train residents and community members in leadership skills, so they can exercise their voice more effectively in city politics or what have you. We talked a little earlier about this idea of civic capacity, where the CDC is playing a role in sort of fostering an effective civic culture where different voices are heard, or isn't just the same three people who've been running the town forever, who always get to decide everything. And then kind of at the far end of the spectrum is where you're really changing the power dynamics in a place where, maybe there's a certain set of people, often white, often older, often homeowners, who dominate all of the civic meetings and community meetings and the city council. And we're really changing the power dynamic where people who've been historically shut out are gaining political power, economic power. So to me, all of these things are part of what community building refers to, but there's a bit of a continuum here and I think some CDCs tend to hang out more on the accountability, collective ownership, social capital, but aren't quite yet at the place where they're talking about building power and challenging power. That can be difficult for a community development corporation, to be honest. Some have struggled with challenging the powers that be for various reasons. So, but when we use the term community building, I think it's useful to think of that across a continuum. And as Mel King would ask, which community, whose voices, who are we speaking for? And as communities have become more diverse or have gentrified, it's not really enough to say the community wants such and such. Because in most of the places where you all work, there are members of the community who want different things. And there are new members of the community, and there are people who are going to come to the community in the future who don't yet have a voice, but maybe they still live in another country, or they live in another neighborhood or another town. So it's important to be mindful of that. We sometimes use the community as a euphemism, or to suggest that there is one point of view in the community. Oftentimes when you hear somebody say the community wants, what they're really saying is I want. And they're trying to connect themselves to the whole community. But within a community, there can be, it seems to me community development should be siding with the voices of people who tend to have less power, who have traditionally not had their voices heard.